Throughout Xhosa history, various rulers have left some kind of impact on their people, but few were as influential as King Phalo Kachiwo and Chief Ndlambe Kakhabe. How's it? I'm Dr. Xhosaland. This is my partner in all things history, Stashy, and you're watching The Historian Stash. Now, before we get started, I think it's important to understand some unique features of the amaXhosa royal hierarchy. Unlike the Zulu kingdom, the position of the amaXhosa king was not absolute. This means that he did not have full control over his subordinates. The junior chiefs of the various chiefdoms acknowledged the king or paramount chief in matters of ceremony, law, and tribute, but he wasn't allowed to interfere in their domestic affairs. Few of these leaders had to answer for their actions in front of the king or paramount chief. In fact, they weren't even compelled to answer for the actions of their own counselors.
No more questions.
As the kings or paramount chiefs could not centralize their power, they were constantly coming up with ways to convince their followers to remain loyal to them.
Bribe!
So each chief or clan head was given quite a lot of autonomy within his own chiefdom or clan. Now, in the last episode, I talked about Xhosa, the oak who unified all amaXhosa clans under his rule. His descendants expanded the kingdom by settling in new territory and bringing people living there under the control of the amaTshawe.
I didn't know we had a king. I thought we were an autonomous collective.
One of these descendants was Phalo, and he would change the entire dynamic of the royal house forever. Phalo Kachiwo, or Phalo, the son of Chiwo, ascended to the Xhosa throne in the 1730s, and he would become one of the most influential kings in Xhosa history. This is because of how he changed the hierarchy of inheriting the Xhosa throne. The story goes that Phalo was about to get married, but to two different women at the same time.
He's not sure.
Things got a bit awkward when both brides and their families arrived at his great place on the same day. His one bride was the daughter of the Mpondo king, while the other was the daughter of the amaTshawe king. Now, just as a side, the amaTshawe is the same kingdom to which the first president of the post-apartheid South Africa, Nelson Mandela, belonged. Now, even though it's customary in Xhosa culture to be polygamous, the great wife and her family occupied a special position in the hierarchy. As great wife to the Xhosa king, the position was even more significant. Therefore, Phalo would have to choose wisely. If he only chose one bride as his great wife, he would offend the father of the other, which could result in a diplomatic disaster. So an old man called amaTshawe approached Phalo and he was like, "My friend, I see you're in a bit of a pickle here. You need to sort this out."
You need to put that out, my friend.
He advised the embarrassed king to let one wife become the head wife, while the other be the so-called wife of the right hand. In this way, both future wives would have equal importance for the royal court. From then on, the royal house would be divided between the great house, on the one hand, and the right-hand house on the other hand, the right hand. As it turns out, this split is regarded as the most significant feature of Xhosa internal politics in the second half of the 18th century. Phalo fathered two sons who were born out of each house, and both sons felt that they had equal claim to the Xhosa throne, even though the eldest son was seen as king.
They're just causing an unnecessary irritation.
Xhosa was born out of the great house, and his people became the amaXhosa, and they lived east of the Great Kai River. Xhosa was born out of Phalo's right-hand house, and his followers became the amaXhosa, living west of the Kai.
He's making this story sound like some Greek tragedy.
Lighten up, dude.
Jeez. Okay. In later years, many amaXhosa chieftains in the Transkei descended from Xhosa, and those in the Ciskei from Xhosa. Better?
Are you crazy?
Xhosa died in 1778, and he was succeeded by his oldest son, Kauta, who is described as a weak leader and only a shadow of his father.
Yeah, well, that's just like your opinion, man.
He was unable to assert his authority over the other members of his father's lineage. So the weak reign of Kauta, along with the general pre-existing weak position of a Xhosa monarch, meant that the power of the king diminished so significantly that Xhosa could build up his power west of the Kai. The amaXhosa embarked on a military campaign against the Ku and the Sand peoples in the west. Xhosa's superiority was recognized by the amaGwali, but he was opposed by the Imidange, who were sworn enemies of the amaGwali and also recognized themselves as Phalo's loyal followers. The other important chiefs in the west were of the Kunukwebe and the Mbalu. Neither of them recognized Xhosa's dominance. So this is some real Game of Thrones stuff.
Winter's coming.
Xhosa took advantage of his brother's death and attacked Kauta, but the attack failed and he was driven off to the north. In 1780, Xhosa proposed an alliance between himself and the Trekboers in the Sierveld, as well as Brentjies Hoogte to the north.
The enemy of my enemy is my friend.
In exchange for their assistance against the Imidange, Xhosa offered friendship and peace. Adrian van Jaarsveld, the local Boer leader, said he was keen, but for unknown reasons, Xhosa backed out of this arrangement. Sometime later, Xhosa and his great son Umlau died in battle against the Abatembu. The deaths of both Xhosa and his successor created a bit of a crisis within the amaXhosa camp. Xhosa had another son called Ndlambe, but he could not become paramount chief of the amaXhosa because Umlau already had two sons, Ntimbo and Nneka. But these two sons were arguing about who should take over the family business. And before you could say
family,
there was a split once more. Ntimbo was supported by the majority of the councillors, but Ndlambe decided to back Nneka. Interestingly, both factions tried to find favor with Kauta, but Ndlambe used his skills as an expert spin doctor to convince the Xhosa king to support the young Nneka.
We've got spin control. That's where I come in.
It worked, and because Nneka was still too young to rule, guess who became the regent and actual paramount chief of the amaXhosa? Soon, Ndlambe's power in the west increased with the conquest of numerous chiefdoms. The Imidange were the first to be defeated when the amaXhosa drove them west across the Fish River, killing their chief in the process.
Oh my lord.
During the retreat, the poor Imidange moved into the territory of the Boers of Agter Brentjies Hoogte, who attacked them together with the amaGwali and the Amantinde in what would become the first war of dispossession.
Oh, Nkosiam.
So now, Ndlambe's main rivals were the Kunukwebe. Ndlambe needed allies to defeat them once and for all. So, like his father, he went to the Boers of the Cape Colony because
The enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Ndlambe found an ally in Barend Lindecker and his band of Boers. They conducted a joint raid against the remaining amaXhosa, but the Dutch courage of Lindecker's Boers ran out, and they were like,
Oh, hell no.
Now, the Kunukwebe and the rest of the remaining Western amaXhosa were a little angry with the Boers for trying to drive them off. So they decided to attack them, and actually drove the Boers back beyond the Swartkops River, near where Port Elizabeth or Gqeberha is today.
Don't panic! Don't panic! Every man for himself!
This forced the colonial authorities into action, and they sent out a well-armed commando, kicking off the Second War in 1793. Consequently, these amaXhosa were driven back and then attempted to retreat to Kahuta in the east, but Ndlambe cut them off and defeated them.
There's a lot going on here.
As a result of this, Ndlambe became the most powerful Xhosa chief in the west.
I am invincible!
But he was unable to capitalize on his triumph. In 1795, Nceka unexpectedly rebelled against his uncle, setting in motion a sequence of events that would directly affect the fate of the amaXhosa. That's it for now. Until next time, stay stashy.